DeMar DeRozan narrowly misses out on the NBA's Clutch Player of the Year award, losing to Steph Curry. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're also going to talk about the Chicago Bulls' first-round draft history since picking Derrick Rose in 2008 and how it's really hurt the Bulls finding a true direction for their franchise. And then lastly, we're going to look at the worst-case scenario that could happen for the Chicago Bulls over this upcoming offseason. We're going to get into all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host here, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content, y'all. So it's been it was a rough season for the Chicago Bulls, an up and down season, I should say, because there were some ups in that. And, coming out of that season, one of the two bright spots that we had were that we had Kobe White in the most improved player of the year conversation. He ends up losing that award, coming in second to that. And then we had DeMar DeRozan in the clutch player of the year. And we also got Alex Caruso hoping to make an all-defensive first team, and hopefully we don't come down, crashing down in sadness in that one as well. But DeMar DeRozan missed out on the Clutch Player of the Year award to Steph Curry, who beat him by 22 points. Steph Curry had 45 first-place votes, 18 second-chance votes, and 19 third-chance votes. When you look at DeMar DeRozan, he had 34 first, 27 second, and 21 third-place votes. He finished with 272 points. Steph Curry finishes with 298 points. So that's what it comes down to. It's still a great season for DeMar DeRozan, especially in the clutch, right? When you look at it, he led the NBA in fourth quarter and overtime points, scoring 550 in that time, which was a franchise record 56 when it comes down to that as well. He ranked second in clutch points at 182 clutch points overall. He shot 48.7% in those situations, and he led the NBA in clutch free throws as well. So, it comes down to it. He was second to Steph Curry in overall field goals made in the clutch. It was a really good season for DeMar DeRozan in the clutch and for the Chicago Bulls in the clutch. The Bulls had a record of 27-17 in clutch games, whereas the Golden State Warriors had a record of 24-24 in those games as well. So DeMar DeRozan was plus 94 in clutch situations. Steph Curry was plus 21. So, that's going to lead a lot of people to say DeMar DeRozan was robbed. I do. I say Kobe White was snubbed, not robbed from the award. I think DeMar DeRozan was definitely robbed of this award. And this is one that I think it comes down to the fact that the Golden State Warriors just won more games, right? The fact, that I think that's really what it comes down to. If we had to narrow it down to any one thing, the Golden State Warriors, who had a pretty disappointing season themselves, also getting eliminated in that play-in tournament. But, when it comes down to it, the Bulls aren't even necessarily covered on the national media in the way that the Golden State Warriors are, but 46 wins by the Warriors, only 39 for the Chicago Bulls. That played a big part in that award going the way of Steph Curry as well. So let me know what you guys think. Do you look at this and do you feel that DeMar DeRozan was maybe robbed of this award? Let's keep in mind, this is an award that people have said that it will probably be named after DeMar DeRozan when it's all said and done. So, it is what it is when it comes down to it, man. That's just the nature of the Bulls season. And it goes back to how important actually winning basketball games are for teams, especially for postseason awards. Now, we'll see what happens with Alex Caruso and him making an all-defensive first team. I do think that he is somebody that is worthy of that accolade and that award. But we'll see if he ends up getting it. Just because he's worthy doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to get it, right? So, DeMar DeRozan's heading into an important offseason for him as well, with him in the Chicago Bulls and talking about his contract. We'll talk a little bit about that on this episode as well. But I want to get into the next topic, right? So you guys know I'm a Chicago Bears fan, as I think a lot of you guys are as well. Not all. Bulls fans and Bears fans are very different fan bases. But I have Chicago Bears Central, and last night we got to cover the draft, and we got to cover what is really, truly a new era of Chicago Bulls basketball, right? I'm sorry, Chicago Bears football. As far as them drafting Caleb Williams, getting Rome Odunze in there. We've already talked about how, the Chicago Skies will have a new future for them as well. Getting Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso. And it really does put a weird place, not for the Chicago Bulls, not necessarily they're looking at the other ones, but I do think that the Bulls GMs can learn from the front offices of the other teams in Chicago. Not the White Sox, though. Same ownership group. They have the same goddamn struggles. But when it comes down to it, but I want to look at something for the Chicago Bulls, right? For your team to truly get to something special, you have to hit on your first round picks. And the Bulls haven't had the best history when it comes down to it. When you look at it, yeah, we drafted Derrick Rose in 2008, of course, and that was something that we had a very slim chance of getting that. And then you look at the fact that we drafted James Johnson, Taj Gibson after that, who, James Johnson's still around in the NBA. Taj is too, for that matter. But, not to say that they were bad picks at all. Taj Gibson was a damn good pick, right? Jimmy Butler after that, a damn good pick. Look at the way that Jimmy Butler grew and the way that the player he turned into. Even though when the Bulls drafted him, they didn't think that he was going to turn into the player he ultimately turned into, and that he's still, having a scrappy Miami Heat team built around him. And when he's on that court, they know that that team could beat anyone, plus with Eric Spoelstra. But, nobody really expected Jimmy. He picked 30th overall to turn into what he turned into. Then you got Marquise Teague. We all know how bad of a pick that was. Tony Snell, bad pick. Doug McDermott, we gave up a lot to bring him in here. He didn't really turn into a whole hell of a lot for us. He has had a solid NBA career, though. Bobby Portis, next up, who, shout out to Bobby Portis. He was in contention for Sixth Man of the Year, has won a ring over in Milwaukee, but we know how that story went for the Chicago Bulls. Denzel Valentine, Larry Markkinen, Wendell Carter, Chandler Hutchinson, Kobe White turned into a pretty damn good player for us this year. Looking for him to continue to improve. Patrick Williams and Dalen Terry are last two first-round picks. Still big question marks on exactly how big they're going to be and turn into for the Bulls as well. But when it comes down to it, you have to be able to hit. And while some of those players have turned into solid NBA players, right? It's not the fact that they haven't really turned into players that you can build, or that the Bulls have been able to build a team around in the case of Jimmy Butler, because you can build a team around Jimmy Butler. Unfortunately, the front office at that time just didn't have the vision to be able to build around a player like Jimmy. Found it difficult to build around Jimmy Butler. That's still sad, right? That's still very sad. And so the place that this team is now, it's not just all on bad drafting, right? And like I said, a lot of those picks weren't necessarily bad draft picks, right? I'm not saying that. But it's just the Bulls' inability to capitalize on their first-round picks, right, to make it mean something for their team. And we'll see if that narrative changes with Kobe White. Maybe they do see the growth of Kobe, and it kind of reinvigorates AK to kind of find a way to build something respectable around Kobe White, right? As far as build with him, we know you're going to need a better player than Kobe to truly get into championship contention. But it's just, again, when we talk about it, and I've talked a lot about on the show, the importance of AK getting these next draft picks right. Specifically, this one coming up here in 2024. 2025, we don't guarantee we're not going to have it. We'll see. But it is important that AK really starts hitting on these first-round picks. When you walk on your first-round picks, on top of you're not a free agent destination, you're not trading for people, right? Not hitting on those first-round picks becomes more and more detrimental to the building of your franchise the longer that it goes on. And it's gone on long enough here for the Chicago Bulls. It's not all on AK. Most of those draft picks I named weren't by AK. Matter of fact, he's only made 2 first-round picks. This will be the second highest draft selection of AK's tenure here with the Chicago Bulls this upcoming year, right? So you again, it's not all on AK, but when you have a franchise that does not build, or that misses on that many first-round picks of players that you haven't been able to keep them here, or they haven't exceeded to the place where you're able to build something around them, it becomes more difficult, right? And that adds to this frustration of Bulls fans. And when you look at how many of those players that we've seen gone on somewhere else and have success, Jimmy Butler being the main one there. Bobby Portis, he went out and got a ring, right? Larry Markkinen turned his career around, even though there were some rumors that the Utah Jazz could still be looking to move him, but still, Wendell Carter's part of a Orlando Magic team with a bright future, even though they were reportedly shopping him, right? And then we have Kobe White, Patrick Williams, Dalen Terry. Kobe kind of more solidified his place, right? We need to make sure he's going to be consistent. Can he follow it up next year? How does he grow his game? But Patrick Williams and Dalen Terry, still big question marks for the Chicago Bulls team with everything else. We have to start hitting on these first round picks. If we truly want to build something here meaningful for the Bulls, we have to be able to do that. We're not going to be a free agent destination, not where we are right now. It's not going to happen. We're not going to be a team that's willing and dealing out on the trade market because we need to hold on to our first round picks, right? So when I hear people say things like, oh, the Bulls need to look to shopping Kobe White and shopping Ayo Dosunmu because you want to strike where their value is hot. You missed out on it on Zach LaVine. It's like at some point you have to start building something and building something that makes sense, right? Not to say that AK and Eversley didn't try to build something here in Chicago. They did. They gave a valiant effort. It came crumbling around them, and they did not know how to rebound from that very well at all, and it's also led to where the Chicago Bulls are right now. We have a 9.4% chance to move into the top four, a 2% chance to move into the number one overall pick. I'm not expecting that. You know what? That would be the type of thing that happens this year in a weaker draft for the Chicago Bulls. But listen, Alexander Sarr's there. I'm not going to be mad if that ends up being the pick if the Bulls do luck into it. But it just highlights how important it is to get your first round picks right. You have to. And so as we move forward to draft coverage for this team, hopefully we start being a team that drafts better with better attention to detail and a better mind on how we're going to build a team around some of these first round picks. Keep in mind, when the thing is, drafting Patrick Williams was looked at as a building block piece by AK. But then very shortly after that, he decided to build around veterans. The draft picks of both Dalen Terry, right? Those draft picks of Dalen Terry, Ayo Dosunmu, what we did with Julian Phillips were all looked as complementary pieces to what this team was trying to do, building around veterans. And at this point, the runway on that is so short that hopefully AK starts understanding to extend things. We have to start building around young players, right? Doesn't mean jettison off all the veterans, but you have to start building a core of young players here that's going to be something that you can build around, which leads me to my next topic for today. What is the worst case scenario for the Chicago Bulls this offseason? And there's a couple of things that can lead into that, right? First, inability to move Zach LaVine, which is a very real possibility, right? You have some people that think the Bulls will not be able to move Zach LaVine's contract unless they attach a pick to it, or they're just going to get a garbage deal back for Zach LaVine. Now, though, some of those other Bulls fans will look at it and say, well, we had an above 500 record after Zach LaVine went down. And I get where you're coming from with that, but you still have to take advantage of assets, right? And while I'm not saying that you want to make, if you do move Zach LaVine, that you need to get a star level player back, it would be nice, but it doesn't mean that. But you still got to get pieces that fit around what you're trying to do here. And it isn't guaranteed that the Bulls are going to do that. There is a realistic world, a very realistic world, that Zach LaVine is in a Bulls uniform at the start of the 2024-25 season. A very real possibility of that. And with the Bulls already giving up first-round picks in 2021, 2023, and 2025, which is coming up next season, the Bulls are in a place to give up a first-round pick to move off of a contract that they could have moved off on had they had some future foresight in that. So, when it comes down to it, if the Bulls don't move on from Zach LaVine, it's not the worst case. I'm not saying just this move makes it a worst-case scenario, but it does add to that when we talk about the other things we have on this list. The next thing, Lonzo Ball is cleared, but then has another major setback next season. If the Bulls miss out on being able to file career-ending injury exception for Lonzo, which, again, I'm not saying they should do unless Lonzo doesn't look to be cleared by training camp, that's when, to me, you should look to do that type of thing. But if Lonzo Ball is cleared early, and that eliminates the chance of filing the career-ending injury exception, and then he suffers a major setback, which may very well happen in next season in 2024-25, that's another opportunity missed by the Chicago Bulls. We already got the disabled player exception, which we could not use because we don't go into the luxury tax, right? So when you look at that situation for the Chicago Bulls with Lonzo Ball, is that would absolutely be something that could be crippling for this franchise in a lot of ways. And you pair that with, in this scenario, you're also bringing back Zach LaVine, and you're not able to move him because teams, whether it be the contract, the injury history, the doubts around how he contributes to winning, the fact that he did have a terrible season when he did play last year, his worst three-point shooting season ever, right? Those two things would make that a very tough season for Chicago Bulls and Chicago Bulls fans. And this is why when AK came out there and said, we know that we need to change some things, it's a very difficult proposition. It's a lot easier said than done, is basically what I'm saying, to make it not as long-winded as what I could make it, right? So not to say that he promised anything that he can't necessarily deliver on. It's just the difficult nature in which it's going to be to actually deliver on that in a meaningful way. It starts getting more evident when you look at these things in reality, right? And to highlight that, this quote from AK at his media day. This group, something doesn't work. I have to find ways to find a group that's going to make improvements. We've done it for a couple of years now, and it hasn't worked. Everything is on the table. It goes without saying that the conclusion of the season fell short of the expectations, regardless of injury status. Any season where we don't end up into the postseason requires close examination, which has already begun. I can talk about all of our players through a positive lens, but in totality, as a team, we didn't meet expectations. That is a quote from Arturas Karnisovas. That's the tweet. That is not the tweet. That is the quote from him. So again, in finding a group that works, it's going to be very difficult to do that. And again, highlighted by our next point, DeMar DeRozan, right? Yeah, theoretically, the Bulls can let DeMar DeRozan walk for nothing. They don't have to pay him an exorbitant amount of money. Now, reportedly, they offered him a 2-year deal worth $80 million. That's $40 million per. But when you look at the case that of the other things that we laid out here, and I haven't even mentioned Patrick Williams yet, because God forbid the Bulls gives Patrick Williams a big deal on top of that, right? Not to say I don't want Patrick Williams back. I'm just saying on a big deal, that's a big proposition, right? So if the Bulls keep DeMar DeRozan and they're able to re-sign him, and it comes with signing him for a long-term money or overpaying for him on top of Lonzo Ball coming back and suffering a major setback, on top of not being able to move Zach LaVine, right? Because that does seem like to be an organizational goal. You're going to sit in a place now where you have to let Andre Drummond walk. The love that we have for Javonte Green and the way that he came back this season, you're going to have to let him walk, right? You're going to have to do these things to just remain under the luxury tax. And that's a big problem as well, because at that point, you're not getting better. You've kept the same group, but you've lost major pieces to that group. Now, maybe you draft a center, and the loss of Andre Drummond isn't as bad. Maybe Julian Phillips actually stays healthy, right? And he does hit a nice little leap, and therefore losing Javonte Green maybe doesn't hurt as much as it could on paper. The Bulls sit in a place right now to where sacrificing the future of their team by either giving up draft picks to move off some of these bad contracts, Vooch is included in that, or sacrificing the future of the team to where you have to stay attached to long-term, big-time money to a player like DeMar DeRozan, who, again, has earned another contract via his play on the court. But when all those things come together, it leads you into a situation that is very, very dour for Chicago Bulls fans. And that is a worst-case scenario by the Bulls. And I'm sure many of you guys in the comments or listening to this are going to come up with things and scenarios that can make it even worse. Having Zach LaVine come back in of itself is not bad, depending on what else happens and how you change this team. Having Lonzo Ball come back isn't by itself bad, especially if he's just coming off the bench. Yeah, the $20 million suck. But then if he does and he suffer another major setback in that's bad. It's just bad. And you're theoretically not going to be able to move off of Lonzo Ball's contract in the trade, again, without attaching some future draft allocations to it. And then the DeMar DeRozan thing, bringing it back. Basically, what I'm saying in this is running it back with the same core that we now know has issues. And while AK sat there and could say things like, we need to make changes to this group, it's a lot easier said than done when you start looking at the realities of it. And so, before we start our draft coverage, which I may start looking at some prospects as early as next week, I may start on also season grades for players. That is something as well that I like to do towards the end of the season. I haven't started yet. We started over on Locked On Bulls, so I don't know if I want to leave some space between that. But overall, we sit in a place of, I've said it before, this offseason is going to be really exciting as far as they're going to have to make a lot of moves to truly change something with this team, or the change that's going to come for this team is really just going to be change to be able to keep us under the luxury tax. But the core of this team is basically going to stay the same. Now, some people may say that and say, Haize, but the way that Io grew, the way that Kobe grew, if we do keep this core group together and you bring Zach LaVine with his ability to stretch the floor from three, that helps this team. Maybe we are a 6th seed at that point in time, and you may very well be right? You may very well be right. Is there a world in which this same core, because of the growth of the young players, comes back and is able to be better than what we've seen from them? There's a possibility of that. What you have to ask yourself is the possibility of that and attaching yourself further to an aging roster, is that glimpse that you see there, whatever vision that you see there, no matter how minute and how small, is it that good to the point to where you're willing to risk the growth and development of young players, and you're willing to attach yourself and, again, have yourself in a situation where you're locked into this roster again for at least another 2, maybe even 3 years. That's what you have to ask. Well, not me. That's what you got. AK has to ask himself. So it's an interesting place that the Bulls find themselves in, and it's a place where the frustration of Bulls fans isn't going to get any quieter anytime soon, and it should not get any quieter anytime soon. Let me be clear on that. And yeah, man, we're gonna watch this offseason. You already know, number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. We're gonna keep giving you that daily content even during the offseason. We don't go away. And man, this season has been a struggle. It's been a big, big struggle. And hopefully we have better days coming ahead. And I want to make everybody clear, to get to those better days, it may take getting worse there for a little while as well. It may not be just a straightforward path into just getting better. But let's hope maybe AK can cook something up. Let me know your guys' thoughts, as always, down below. Get your thoughts and ideas in. I'll tell you how to do that for the mailbag tomorrow. Follow the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.